there's a real kind of mix of companies there in our Northampton top 100, which is really interesting.
And I like to fly the flag on a national basis for our county.
Companies that employ a lot of workers at and around minimum wage have been hit really, really hard.
And some new entrants?
Quite a few new entries. I think 18 new entries to the top 100 this year, which is fantastic. And really, really good to sort of see that. So,
and we shouldn't forget, when we talk about Northamptonshire, that Wellingborough, Kettering, Corby, Toaster have got some really strong businesses.
This episode of All Things Business, the podcast, is brought to you by our digital media partner, DFA Law. DFA Law, providers of expert and dedicated legal advice to businesses and families since 1838. DFA Law, the law firm for life.
Gents, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Ben. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah, I know. It's like deja vu,
isn't it?
It must be that time of year.
I had to make sure I didn't wear the same thing that we wore last
agreed.
time.
Yeah.
Have I gained a couple of chins? I probably have. So, Northamptonshire Limited Report, that time of the year, but conscious that not everybody listening or watching is perhaps aware of that. So, I want to just start off by introducing you, Mike, and then we'll move on to Matt.
Yeah, sure. So, Mike Tilson, a partner at Grant Thornton. We produce this report every year. Essentially, it celebrates the top 100 businesses, private companies in Northampton. We also now include a fastest growth category as well as some international contributors, just to really reflect, the broad ecosystem that exists here. And, I genuinely think we do punch above our weight as a county. When you do look at the stats versus other counties, the average size of the private companies in Northampton is a lot bigger than some of the surrounding counties. And I think that's really impressive.
Matt?
Yeah, Matt Thompson. I'm a corporate partner at Howes Percival. We're really proud. This is our second year now sponsoring this report alongside GT. Nice to have you guys on board as well, Ben.
Yep.
It's a really impressive sort of set of results, isn't it, this year? And I'm sure we'll talk through some of the trends in a little while. But Mike's absolutely right. It's great to be working in and around Northamptonshire, isn't it? Great business to sort of shout about.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think this is. I'm going back, for those that have heard me say this, I apologise, close your ears for 30 seconds, but I go back to this Northamptonshire Limited Report probably since its first year, 8-9 years ago. I think it's
more.
Was it?
More, yeah. I think we're into double digits, yeah.
Oh, well, okay, so, sorry. But my first experience of it was really impressive. And I don't know about other people, but I was almost like, I want to be in that list one day. And that won't probably ever happen, but it is a real celebration, and business owners and boards of directors should be very proud to be in that top 100.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we want to take that to the next level. So we do change the format of the event that we wrap around this, just, I guess, for a bit of diversification. But we always had a big event where we invited kind of all and sundry from Northamptonshire, got together, did that a few years. But last year, and you obviously both there, we did a dinner which was just for the owners and the C-suite management of companies in the top 100, including the international contributors, etc. And that just gave it a different sort of vibe, I thought, last year. It was a much more sort of focused room, really impressive to get the calibre of people that were there. Hopefully they all made some great connections. I know there's been some good follow-ups off the back of that.
And it's nice just to get them all in a room together where they can talk about the sort of trends they're seeing in their businesses and really sort of make it a business leaders sort of club almost, isn't
exactly.
it, really?
And also challenges. I remember
absolutely.
One of the tables that I was on, it was, whilst it'd been an interesting and overall solid year for many of them, obviously because they were in the room, it was also talking around some of the challenges that they fear were coming. And we might as well start off with the budget, because that this time last year the election was on the horizon and there was a lot of uncertainty, although I think everybody probably knew which way it was going to go. What's been the sort of reaction from your perspective, Mike?
The biggest sort of negative impact we're hearing for businesses is around the national insurance, so both the increasing rate and changing of the band. And when you couple that with the minimum wage increase, companies that employ a lot of workers at and around minimum wage have been hit really, really hard. And a lot of these businesses will be operating at 10-15% profit margins. And what the change is going to sort of effectively wipe all that out in one go. And a lot of businesses are going to then have to readapt, like they did through sort of the post-COVID era of the high inflation. Is how much can we pass on to our customers and how quickly? How much pain do employees have to wear in the next round of salary reviews, that sort of stuff. And I think, unfortunately, what we're going to find is that there's kind of a period of it's got to sort itself out for probably another 12 or 18 months from where we are now. You know, there's companies in the report here that have had a big rebound in profit off the back of having quite subdued profit during that inflationary time. They've resettled, but now they've been hit again, and I think that's really hard for businesses.
Matt?
Yeah, I echo what Mike said. Really, there's going to have to be some sort of changing of what people are going to do. So lots of our clients that we're talking about investing a lot of money in tech and sort of products that sort of grow and develop the business. That pot of money is now going to have to be used to just simply keep the salaries going and paying the sort of the tax on that. So it is a big shift, and I think we'll see that in next year's report. In terms of how that flows through into the numbers.
I'm intrigued from an M&A perspective. When it's an election year, do you tend to find that there's an acceleration in getting deals done, or is there a hold-off period because they want to see what happens?
There was, certainly in the run-up to the budget this year, I guess it is those big events, whether it's an election or it's a budget. Yeah, in the run-up to the budget, there was a lot of talk about what are they going to do to CGT rates and are they going to equalise in terms of sort of income tax rates. It wasn't quite that bad, but there was such a massive rush of deals going through, wasn't there, Mike? I guess you saw the same thing in that run-up to the budget.
Yeah, I think we saw... To take it back to the election, we saw H1 was really challenging in terms of deal volumes. If you look at the stats, there was, if you compare it to sort of certainly pre-COVID times, there was a lot fewer deals done in H1 this year. H2, there was this enormous acceleration towards the budget. People were trying to beat a potential massive rate change. Now we're settled and the rate change wasn't so bad. I think we'll have quite good M&A conditions going forward for the next few years. The only sort of fly in that ointment for businesses, or the biggest one I see is around national insurance. But then we have had a big change to IHT or inheritance tax, and essentially what it if you sort of boil it down, previously if you died owning shares in a business, you could just pass them down a generation without incurring any inheritance tax. Now, essentially, you'll be taxed at almost the same rate as had you have sold them. The difference is if you haven't sold them, you haven't got the cash to fund the IHT bill, and that is going to take a lot of planning and consideration by any private business owners, but particularly those where the current share owners are in sort of their later years. And I don't know if you've started looking at that with any of your clients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's we talked a long time ago about sort of succession planning and making sure people thought about these sort of things in advance, and it's no good now just sort of thinking, I'm going to just do it a couple of months before I want to sell. It needs to be a long-term planning there, and with these changes to IHT and also agricultural property relief and all those sorts of things that are coming through in the budget and being consulted on at the moment, people are going to have to think about this a long time in advance to make sure they've got that planning done in advance. And in reality, what we might see is that people will be passing on shares to the sort of second generations before death rather than doing it on death now. So it may still see an uptake in an M&A activity on the back of it, but it's all sort of still in consultation process at the moment.
Now, the report's quite detailed, but some of the stats that are included are on the turnover range. So we've got the total turnover, EBITDA and total fixed assets. Which companies have really contributed to the growth in the top 100, Mike?
Yeah, so in terms of the top 100 themselves, the top three spots are held by the same companies they were the year before, so Avara, Winvic and Whitworth, so not too much change there. But if we look at sort of some of the higher growth companies within that top 100, your real standout is Weatherby's Bank. I mean, they've grown revenues about 80% year on year. I think they won, it was post the report cut-off, but they've won Private Bank of the Year for the second year in a row. Really good scores on sort of customer quality and feedback and those sorts of things. We've seen CSG Longboat, the chemicals distributor, grow really strongly off the back of really good stock availability, so being there for their customers, having what they need at the right time. And a more interesting one as well, Sloan Helicopters, which has picked up a number of new contract servicing, sort of various air ambulances and stuff. So there's a real kind of mix of companies there in our Northampton top 100, which is really interesting.
And some new entrants?
Quite a few new entries. I think 18 new entries into the top 100 this year, which is fantastic, and really good to sort of see that. So, just a couple of those. Brand K Holdings has sort of made it in at sort of number 24, I think. That's a sort of radiator and bathroom supply and business, and they've gone on a bit of a sort of acquisition trail there with them. A Gatestock East Midlands, that's another one that sort of made that sort of top 100 into sort of number 74 this year. Their sort of groundworks sort of business historically in the sort of residential homes market, but now sort of diversifying into other sectors. So doing other infrastructure projects as well. So really good to sort of see those businesses coming through.
Brilliant. And I like to fly the flag on a national basis for our county, but also on a local level. My hometown, whilst I was born in Liverpool, is Wellingborough.
Yeah.
And there is a sign. We spoke before after press record that there is a sign when you go into Wellingborough that a few of the letters are scrubbed out, so it says well rough. But this report says otherwise, because what is good to see is that on the heat map there's a good spread of the top 100 across Northamptonshire. And we shouldn't forget, when we talk about Northamptonshire, that Wellingborough, Kettering, Corby, Towcester have got some really strong businesses.
Yeah, I mean, I was up in Kettering on Monday meeting Huxlow Logistics, and they are scaling really rapidly through kind of their talisman, Alfonso, at the moment, who's got great sort of penetration through technology into a lot of their suppliers and customers, which is enabling them to essentially move parcels cheaper, benefit from better rates, and that's just an innovative thing that they've done to be able to grow quickly using technology. And I guess we're seeing that across the board. That sort of use of technology is going to become even more critical, right, to grow but also protect margin.
And if we look at the previous report year on year, turnover's up.
Yeah.
Number of employees slightly down, and profitability slightly down.
Yeah.
Was that a surprise?
It's not a surprise, I don't think, if you think back to sort of the period we were talking about, and there's a bit of uncertainty that we've sort of all been going through, sort of coming off the back of COVID. We're sort of seeing that sort of recovery, turnover being up. That's sort of expected. I mean, a bit of a surprise in terms of sort of employee numbers going down slightly, particularly when unemployment rates were sort of pretty low generally. I mean, quite interesting to see that actually salaries were up about 10% on employees. I guess that's probably, trying to retain top talent in and around Northampton and trying to make sure people want to stay here and continue working here and showcasing what a great place it is to sort of work in, really. So, I mean, it's interesting.
It still gets me, though. I mentioned this on another podcast at the end of last year. It doesn't matter if you're at Wellingborough, Kettering, Northampton train station. On that platform, we've still got, we're not dozens, we're talking hundreds of people between the hours of 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock that are getting on that train, and they're going predominantly south or north out of the county. And it still gets me. I almost want to conduct a survey to find out where they're going and why. And yes, there'll be a percentage of them that are going there for maybe that city life, but obviously they're living up here for probably because of far cheaper
cost of living,
cost of living. But I always want to sort of say, I wonder if there is a business within Northamptonshire that can do the job that you're doing in London. And I'd be surprised if there wasn't. Yes, there's going to be that sort of speciality, but it still sort of gets me when you're there, because
you see the talent walking out the door almost.
Exactly. But that's a bigger thing. Collaboration is probably a key theme throughout the report. The Silverstone Tech Cluster has been going for a number of years now, but I think that's really come to fruition in terms of collaboration amongst those businesses. What thoughts on that, Mike, and others?
Yeah, we're really proud to be involved in that. Collaboration, but also innovation is critical around the STC, and it's about genuinely leading technologies, leading IP, innovation, pushing things forward. So many of those companies supplying to F1 and other aerospace and really sort of high-end places. Outside of that, you've got things like the Northampton Saints Business Club, which I know I've seen Matt there. I've probably seen you there as well. Which again,
sorry about that.
Is another great.
Oh, sorry, you're on about the club, not. I thought you meant the game.
Which is another. It's another great initiative in terms of getting business leaders together. I know you bring people together in the county as well a lot, and I think there is a lot business leaders can learn from each other, right? For whether it's learning, sharing ideas, emotional support of being, it's lonely at the top, right? That's what we hear from people a lot, and sometimes there's a hesitancy to share concerns and vulnerabilities, and that's why those networks are critical.
I completely agree, and I think M&A's, unless you're that serial entrepreneur that's done lots of them, which is, let's face it, is the minority of individuals.
Yeah.
Business owners are probably only going to do one, possibly two in their career, in their lifetime, and I do feel that it probably is lonely for them, because I still don't think there's enough. And I understand this as well from a confidentiality perspective. People don't want to tell all, but I think there's so much to learn there. And when you look at that marketplace of business owners that want to learn, I think sharing those stories and those bumps in the roads, and not mistakes but experiences, is so important. The more people can do to offer to support that, the better. So that collaboration is really important.
I think that's right, and I think that's we touched on it, didn't we, earlier, about the top 100 dinner that we did last year. But I think that's a great environment to be able for people to sort of share those stories without sort of worrying about what other people are thinking, or worrying about competitors sort of sniffing down their necks. Actually, they can speak openly about what have been the challenges, what do you need to look at if you've grown a really successful business. What do you need to be thinking about succession, or about exiting, or your routes out. So I think they're all really good forums for developing that.
Yeah, and I think there's historically been a little bit of negative connotation around being seen to be wanting to sell your business, and I think that's unfair actually as a generalisation, because selling a business many times is just part of its evolution, right? It's part of its movement in time. We're seeing a massive prevalence of employee ownership trusts these days. Briggs and Forrester,
just on that, if I may, to come back to the inheritance tax, do you think that could encourage businesses to go more down that route, or not?
I think so. I think the inheritance tax thing will encourage people to think about their options, regardless of whether it's an EOT or a sale, a family MBO, an external MBO, etc. But that movement from the company, from being founder owned and led to whatever's next, it's natural, and often in these situations, I mean, Matt and I worked on a deal together recently where the main founder got bought out, the two kind of co-founders who were smaller shareholders increased their shareholding, some of the other management team came into the equity. This is all about transition and succession within these types of businesses. EOTs provide a different sort of solution to that, but I don't think people should be too worried about talking about things like that as an option, because it's actually good for employees, and customers and suppliers as well, who then have a business which keeps growing. Sometimes if an owner gets to a certain level, they might just want to just keep things running flat, not sort of bet the farm. But actually, if they sort of cash in or liquidate their position, the next generation can then really kick on and grow.
And I think a lot of people, if you've not been in that industry, you've not been in that environment before, you've never bought or sold a business, your natural reaction is probably to think, well, I have to go and speak to my customers or my suppliers to see if anybody wants to buy this. And actually, that isn't the only option that's available to people. There's so many different options in terms of how to exit as well, aren't there? Yeah. And I think that's that particularly the sort of EOT MBO route is becoming much more prevalent nowadays as a sort of option to be able for people to get out. Yeah,
and we've got more private equity interest in the county as well. So a number of funds that really cover Northampton as a key market for them. That's minority deals or majority deals. That could be cash out to founders. It can be cash for growth. So these owners and companies should be aware of what their options are. Absolutely. Talking to people like us and others in the ecosystem, they can get that insight and that intel, and then ultimately work out what fits their objectives. What do they want to get on with?
So how can businesses really drive growth in 2025 and going into 26?
I think there's got to be a focus on tech. I think that the sort of investment into tech has got to be the sort of driver of growth going forward. And that's not to say that's a replacement for employees and a replacement for recruitment. I think you've still got to get top talent into the business, but I think trying to be more efficient in terms of how you do things is going to be the real driver in terms of how you really grow. And I guess diversifying portfolios as well, making sure you're not exposed to just one particular sector or one particular customer or supplier, making sure you've got your options available there so that you can drive your growth and your margins, but making sure you're not sort of susceptible to one particular industry or customer or supplier taking you down, I guess, along the way.
Yeah, we produce a business outlook tracker, which is sort of outside of this report that said 50% of companies are aiming to increase their technology spend in the next 12 months, and hopefully the NIC thing doesn't kind of curtail some of that.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say, different to Matt, is access to capital. I alluded to it before. Whether it's bank debt, whether it's private equity, whether it's selling part of the business to a trade player, access to capital can help you grow, whether it's M&A, whether it's buying, new machinery or assets, whether it's funding for overseas expansion, etc. That is actually a handbrake on growth for companies. There's sometimes a hesitancy again to do that. It's seen as risky, but if you're properly advised and the type of capital you take on is suitable for the purpose, then it can be really powerful.
We've got a very strong international presence as well within the top 100. There's a 10 billion, excuse me, 10 billion is the total turnover of the Northamptonshire Limited. 4.6 of that comes from our top international contributors, of which there's 25. In terms of global ownership, it's actually very diverse, from Belgium and Bermuda to Japan and South Korea. And it's a good mix of businesses there, some of which I hadn't heard of before. But those 25 represent 40% of the turnover.
Yeah, it's a great look. We know it. We shout about it all the time, don't we? But it's a great place to do business, and you'll see a lot of those people on that list of those top international contributors. A lot of them are in logistics, a lot of them in automotive. That's probably playing out to the connections to Silverstone, connections to where we are locally in terms of being on the M1, A14, all the sort of routes that we can get across the country very, very quickly. So I think it's a natural place to be in the UK for those sorts of industries, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a competitive advantage of Northampton, isn't it? Its geographic location, and there's the county should be leveraging that as much as it can, and it is. And to your point, there's some fantastic examples of that already.
So business owners, boards that are listening and watching this, that perhaps maybe it hadn't been on their radar quite yet. They might have been looking at 2030 plus, but the message to them now is that maybe they want to bring that forward and start having those conversations maybe a year or two early, given what's happened over this last 6 months.
I think being prepared and forewarned is forearmed, isn't it? So I think having those conversations early, even if it doesn't mean you're going to do a transaction quickly or over the next sort of year or so, is still worth having those conversations now. I think getting your team of professional advisors in place that you've worked with, you sort of trust as you're going through that process, will mean that is much easier. And it means we can also talk to you about things that you can be thinking about now to help drive that growth even more over the next few years. So whether that is trying to incentivise management teams by putting in place some sort of EMI, employee ownership sort of management incentives to try and get people to help grow the business, or whether that's an acquisition or something along the way before you get to sort of selling out. I think investing now and having that time with professional advisors is going to be well spent.
I agree. That succession piece is critical, and whether it's whatever the plan of the owner is or their objective, bringing that management team through just gives them optionality. And the biggest mistake we see, or I see, doing M&A is people that get to a certain age and then go, I'm done, I'm absolutely exhausted, I need out of this really as quick as I can. And that you're not setting yourself up for success in a transaction at that point.
And the one thing that I've taken from being involved in this with you guys for the last couple of years is those options. Because that transaction, it's almost like a bit of an umbrella word, because you've got PE, you've got MBO, you've got EOT, you've got options as a business owner as to what as to what that exit looks like.
Absolutely, and each business will have a different one that works for them. There might be a couple of options that work for somebody, but until you know what your options on the table are, you can't really make that decision. And as you say, Mike, you don't want to be in a business when you're sort of 70 plus and thinking I've got to do something quickly because of ill health or family circumstances or whatever it is. You want to make sure you've thought about that 10 years before to make sure it's an easy transition.
Yeah, and the reality is if you've got a management team that are passionate about growing the business, you're likely to be growing faster, and whoever the buyer is, whatever type of buyer that is going to place a high valuation on a business that's perceived to be able to keep growing on its own without the shareholders.
So we're coming towards the end. Before I ask you that one final question, is there anything in the report that we haven't covered off? All the details about downloading it are going to be at the end of the episode, and obviously in the link, so people can get a copy of that digitally. But is there anything that I've missed there that you want to...
I wanted to congratulate Matt for Howes Percival being the highest margin business in the report, which must go to the quality of service that you guys deliver.
Oh, no comment, Mike. No, I mean, we've said it already, haven't we? But just the sort of the complete wide variety, the complete sort of sectors, the complete different sectors that are in there. It's just a real well done to everybody in the county that's sort of really investing time, money, effort into the county, because it's a great place to do business. And we should be able to sort of shout about it more on a national world stage, really, about how good it is to do business here. So, yeah, great to be able to do that.
Good stuff. Right, dinner guests. Dinner party tomorrow night. Who are you bringing, Mike? Past or present, 4 people. Let's see how they've changed in a year.
I'm trying to think about what I said.
No, don't. It doesn't have to be you picked before.
I don't think I said... So, Elon Musk, I mean...
What, just because he's got a bit more power now?
Not just because it's just I'm so impressed.
Can you imagine being on that plane with him and Donald and a Big Mac? How random!
I mean, getting to the top of his gate, getting to the top of industries that frankly he's got no right to sort of start in, space, electric vehicles and stuff. He's learned about these things on his own and got himself to the top of these industries. Tesla's worth $1 billion now. Like, it's absolutely unbelievable. I read one of his books a few years ago, and it's just his sheer determination and persistence is what's got him to where he's obviously extremely smart as well. So I'll leave me with that one, and I'll think of some others while Matt answers.
Cool, Matt.
Oh, okay. So I think... I think it'd be really great to have somebody at that table like, and I don't know if I said this last year, but somebody like David Attenborough, who I would just love to have sort of half an hour. Just
granddad, isn't he?
Isn't he? Yeah, but just to sort of really find out a little about his life, what he's done. He would have some stories to tell, I would think, at a dinner party. So
Beckham, he's lived a really interesting life. What he's doing over in Miami now.
Knows how to earn a pound note as well.
He does. And, that, you just, I know it's all, some of it's staged, right? But, you see the picture of him over in Miami with Messi and everyone. He's just having so much fun at the moment. So I'd love to hear some more stories that he's got.
Right, I'm going to go for, it's going to be a big year for them next year. Liam and Noel Gallagher. I'd like to have them at the table just to find the inside
David
story.
Attenborough?
Yeah, I think so.
Man, that's brilliant. That's a great table.
Yeah.
Would you break it up, or would you leave it David to break Liam and Noel?
Oh, I'd separate them either side of him, I think. But I didn't get tickets for next year, so I'd be good. So it'd be nice to have them around the table, I think.
Very good.
Final one, Barack Obama. I just think, the job he did when he was president in terms of his, ambassador for the world, essentially, was just, fantastic. And, he's been, such a great example. And, the work he did outside the US was amazing.
Do you know what, on the last podcast I did with Derek Redmond, and he was, Michelle Obama had heard about his story, reached out to him and invited him to go over to America to go and do a talk, which he did. And Barack Obama, they'd been invited to the White House, but he couldn't make it. So his security personnel, or one of his security personnel, would grab Derek to apologise and say, look, the president sends his deepest apology. He has at Summits Cup, he can't meet you today, which he was gutted about. But that's pretty special, isn't it?
Yeah.
As a guy in Northampton, born and bred. And
yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, listen, great way to end. I wish you both a really prosperous new year. Thank you for taking the time and getting us on board with this, and really looking forward to the 2025 report.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us, and thanks for being part of it this year.